Right. Right. Good morning. I'm calling the Texas Charters Board of Directors meeting to order. Today is Friday, November 8th, and it is 11:07 a.m. A quorum is present for this meeting. All board members are present with the exception of Lance Losi. The meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting was posted as required by law. So we're going to jump right into the agenda. And are we going to do the presentation of the annual financial report?
Yes, sir. We're going to start with that.
Is that going to go to Corey?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So would you start with talking about this being a public hearing, how you post and all that? If Sarah needs to chime in, she can 10 days prior, and you know all those facts, or does Sarah need to ask you to go ahead, Sarah?
You have to post it not more than 30 days, but not sooner than 10 days. Has to be local paper and also consider the press of the state.
Which newspaper do we use?
The one here in Louisville Leader.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Just find newspapers interesting because who reads them anymore?
That's true.
Do it online.
All right, so you should have all received 2 copies of the first report, one for Texas College Preparatory Academies, one for High School. I will start with the TCPA report. Simply put, our score, what you'll notice, first of all, is this is the 2018-2019 rating, but it covers the fiscal year 2017-2018. Always have to make sure everybody understands. It's not the previous year. But our score for this past year for TCPA was a 98, which of course is superior. We have behind there, just for reference purposes, the previous year's score, which for TCPA was 100. The only change was indicator number 8, which just has to do with a certain ratio that has to do with long-term liabilities over assets, and that can kind of fluctuate exponentially over time. It's not that big of a deal. But also want to highlight, when these numbers first come out, we prepared this, they come out with what's called preliminary first rating. And what that means is this is your score if you don't appeal, basically. So if you're not going to appeal that number, your preliminary rating is pretty much going to be your final rating. However, these have been, as of what, last week? Last week, these have been finalized. So these are the actual final numbers. So I just wanted to note that. So once again, this year was a 98 for TCPA. Last year was a 100. Moving on to Premier High School, you will see the same thing. This year's accountability rating actually covers the previous fiscal year. This year's score was, of course, a 100, which is a superior. And of course, looking at the previous year, it was a 96, and the one that changed was the same indicator. It's a little bit sitting on your balance sheet, but there was nothing significant that happened. One thing also to note, the calculations for the charter first coming this next year will be a little bit different. They've added a handful, I think 3 or 4 additional calculations or indicators. So we are looking at those and see how they may or may not impact us to whatever degree they will. So next year's report will be a little bit different, but it actually has a look back period as well. I think 3 years for certain indicators. So it'll be a little bit different next year, but we still expect good results. Anybody have any questions about these reports? All right.
So note, go ahead, let me let you finish then.
No, I'm finished.
Note that what you will see next November when we do this in 2020, November 2020, will be based on the same information. That's my understanding, Corey, from looking at the commissioner rules. The November of 2021, 2 years from now, will be different. And we're concerned about the way they're structuring it around the wording. James or Corey, tell me you disagree with this, but it's worded that you have to have your original budget within 10% on the revenue side, 10% to what the actuals are at the end, which is very difficult because of our virtual school. So these rules are already in place. We're probably not going to be able to get something changed. They could open it back up, have public comments, and get it changed, but it probably will not happen. And so you will more than likely, next year, you'll see something similar, this 9800 to 100 score, 95 to 100, but you will, in 2 years, probably see it dip 10 points. And it's 10 points, right? James and Corey, it's 10 points that this will be based on. So just so you know.
And that's part of the look back period as well. It's like
Right.
So we may be fine. We may be fine the first year. We may be fine in 2 years and maybe even 3 years, but the fourth year we would end up with it if we don't get it fixed, right?
We're going to get it fixed.
We're going to try to get it fixed.
Nice caveat. We're going to try.
We'll try really.
Good. Okay.
Any questions on that?
What do we got to do?
Nothing.
Just
That's why.
Do not have anyone here. We've not heard from the receptionist. Is anyone here for public comment?
that's for public comment. So set aside no less than 5.
Right. And Chris, I'm going to mention, and I'll let you interject as well. This is changing, though. There was a law that passed about public comment. Now requires that you allow the public to comment on every agenda item and give them, we can set the time. So unless y'all tell us otherwise, we're going to change this. Next board meeting, you're going to see 2 minutes, and then there's no limit. That's it. Lindsay's urging that we don't put a limit. In our case, we're not having a lot of comment anyways. So could end up where you've got an issue, something big going on, where everybody wants to show up, and you go for 3 or 4 hours. I don't think that'll happen.
What you put in place as at a time, so get that sign up where they want to speak, all that. So it's the structure good. The opportunity to speak on every item.
Okay.
Good. We have an executive report, if you're ready for that. I've asked Dr. Duncan to come in and present on this today. Something I want y'all to have exposure to, and you've asked before, is exposure to more of our executive team. So Steve here was today for Arkansas, and Dr. Duncan, I've asked her, kind of like Steve, start off with a background and then how long she's been here, and then she's going to present a couple of things about some exciting things about this beginning of the school year. So Dr. Duncan.
So good morning, everyone. It's nice to be in front of you again, and for those of you who have not met me. So I have been at ResponsiveEd going on 8 years now, and the time has flown. I can't believe it's been that quickly. But currently I serve as the Executive Vice President over School Operations. So I supervise the Teams Department, our Child Nutrition Department, Health Services Department, Counseling Department, and anything else that we need from me to do. But I love my job, have a great staff, and work diligently to serve the campuses, the campus staff, and the children that attend ResponsiveEd. I came to Texas to ResponsiveEd after working in Arkansas. I served as the charter and homeschool director for the state of Arkansas for almost 6 years. And that's where I first came in contact with ResponsiveEd. It was the very first time they ever put an application into the state of Arkansas. And I came to corporate office and worked with the staff here. They put an application in, and it was denied. They put an application in for Texarkana, Arkansas, which at the time had a high school that was in 7 years of school improvement and desperately was in need of options for serving students in that area. But the application was solid. The politics were difficult at the time, and so the application denied by the state. And after that board meeting, I walked up to Mr. Cook, and I remember he stay shaking his hand, and I was very discouraged. It was one of the best applications that had ever come forth through the state at that time. And I said, well, Mr. Cook, what I'm most discouraged about today, it was the students in Texarkana, Arkansas, that lost out because their only option for a high school at the point in time is a high school that's in 7 years of building. And it was soon made apparent to me that maybe my goal, my vision, just didn't align with what I wanted to do for the rest of my professional career. And then upon visiting with Mr. Cook and Mr. Davis and Dr. Wimberly, I came here to respond to that. So that's a little bit about my background.
And I have to add, because it's so sad, and it went into your decision, I'm sure, when they voted it to deny us, somebody had spoken up and from the state board, and they said that because this one sub-pop, which was 19% of kids in 11th grade, could pass the English reading test, 19%. Because the year before it was 17 or 18%, they were seeing improvement.
It was like a 1% improvement
Means like one
under
student.
one subpopulation
Yeah, one or two
within
students.
that high school, and it was denied. So very glad to be here. I'm all about options for students, and I'm glad that we provide various options under the various brands that are ResponsiveEd. So just in speaking with you today, I'm just going to give a brief summary of what we're looking at for enrollment and for waitlist over a 2-year comparison, last year to this year. So we'll start first with looking at Texas and Arkansas enrollment. And if you look at our TCPA charter, because we have 2 charters within the state of Texas, if you look at our Texas College Preparatory Charter, you'll see that we're showing growth there. Last year, 18-19 to this year, 19-20. Embedded within those numbers naturally are our classical schools, our founder schools, and then our high school. Then we also have our Premier High School Charter. And there you see our numbers from 18-19, 19-20. We also have our virtual school now, and we have our numbers from 18-20 virtual. And I also chose to include Arkansas because that gives you a picture of what we're looking at in its entirety. And so you can see that over the last 2 years, we've had a gain of 1,107 students. When Mr. Gass mentioned to you certainly earlier, he said you do have to have a snapshot in time. So this snapshot in time was taken as of the last week of October. And so we could be up a few students or down a couple between now and then. But that's a snapshot of what our enrollment gains look like between last year and this year. Going on to waitlist, and then I'll take any questions that you might have also. For our Texas College Preparatory Charters, Texas College Preparatory Academy, you can see last year we had wait lists for both the classical schools and our founder schools. Our founders continue to grow in this way.
3,900 of them.
Yeah, and if you look at this year for 1920, you can see that our wait lists have grown for our Texas College Preparatory Academy. And then with Arkansas, certainly, you can see for 18-19 that Northwest Arkansas Classical Academy usually carries a pretty solid wait list for a campus of its size. It did last year, and though we did open up 4 sections of the lower grades, as James mentioned earlier, we're still growing a very healthy wait list for Northwest Arkansas Classical Academy in Arkansas. So currently our wait list numbers are at 1,830. Again, that number fluctuates a little bit. We could have students applying today that are on wait list since the last week of October. We soon start our open enrollment period. That starts the first Monday in December every year. And so this year, the first Monday in December falls on December 2nd. And we will be running our open enrollment and re-enrollment period during that time for our campuses within Texas.
Let me just point out, if you think of the day, could you go back one slide? You look at the slide with actual enrollment numbers, you'll see we're growing at about 5%. So you see that 1,000, almost 1,200 out of 18, 19,000 kids. So you see about 5% growth, and then go back to the wait list number. Again, that's about, what, 20%? The total up there, the 48, 42, little over 20% demand in addition to what the kids were able to serve. So you do see a lot. We have every single meeting, it seems like, there's another topic of building buildings and financing buildings, right? And I know you want to hear more from, what's actually going on, what are the stories, and we're trying to do more of that in these executive reports. But realize all those stories, all that data goes back to you as a board, us as a board, looking at, we got to build more buildings. And it's gotten tougher because of certain parts of the state. You have tornado. There's a federal law that the municipalities are implementing. That's this tornado shelter. And so we can't just go into a building now and say, hey, well, there's a church over there and it's empty, during the week, let's put a school. It's getting more and more difficult. So that's why you're seeing more and more buildings being built, or us requesting that you approve those. Do you have any questions for Mary Ann? What about new schools and new buildings we've opened?
If you have no questions on this, there are a few more things I'd like to highlight. This year is the first year for us, ResponsiveEd, to do an 1882 partnership with an ISD. And so this year we were selected to partner with Beaumont ISD down in Beaumont. And we partnered with them to open Fell Price Elementary under Beaumont ISD. Fell Price was hit extremely hard during Tropical Storm Imelda. And because of that, the school closed on September 19th after opening a few weeks prior to that. The school did not open again until October 14th because of expansive damage within the building itself.
Mainly sheetrock.
Yes, a lot of replacement of sheetrock and those kinds of items from mold. Still undergoing some things to make sure students are served appropriately within that building. At the start of the school year, the enrollment there was 465. When classes resumed on October 14th, enrollment was 389. And as of the last week of October, it was about 398. So enrollment is certainly growing back within that building. You have to remember, whenever those tropical storms happen, students get displaced. They end up living with relatives, family members, until they can get back to their home, to their location. So the school is growing again. But this is the first year for ResponsiveEd to ever have approval for an 1882 partnership. And we're encouraged by that and hope to see good things out of that under Erica Johnson Allen's direction down at Beaumont.
Superintendent of Beaumont is very encouraged. I was down there a couple of weeks before we reopened, walking through the building. Dr. Allen, the superintendent, is still very excited about the relationship. We're all frustrated. Kids are frustrated, parents, that this tropical storm came through. And of the, 20-something buildings the district has, 2 of them were damaged. 1 of them was Fell Price. So we all know we've got to roll up our sleeves even more to make sure these kids make up for lost time.
Very true. A few other things I wanted to mention were our new buildings that we opened. We opened at Founders Frisco High School this year, out of growth in the high school arena. Founders Shirts was opened in December last year, their high school building, but this is their first full year to have classes. And then Tyler Classical, they're just moved into their new high school building this year. So out of growth in the high school arena, we are opening those buildings. It's awful nice for a parent to drop their child off in kindergarten, and no matter what grade levels they have of students, as we grow with them, they grow with us. And we're able to keep their children within the same physical plant K-12. That's something that seems to provide a lot of comfort, and I can certainly understand that. Another new initiative that we did this year was to partner with 2 of our new schools that we opened with the Neighborhood Schools program. And so in partnering with the Neighborhood Schools program, we're serving students in East Tex Jensen Classical and in West Chase Classical. One of the things that the neighborhood program has instilled is opening schools up, for instance, with K first and fifth in East Tex Jensen, and in West Chase, K and 1. And so it's a varying growth model that this partnership with neighborhood schools has allowed us to look at and try as we go through this time period for this year, being our first year in that partnership. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? But those are just some of the highlights of things I wanted to bring to you today. Just snapshots of where we're at in this point in time. Do you have any questions over any of the information that I brought to you today, or anything regarding my duties here for ResponsiveEd?
I don't. It was very interesting. You know, and I've gotten for a long time the fact that our schools, when we started out, were just built too small, and we had, you know, a lot of growth in the areas. I think what we've done from just that side of it has been very, very good, and I hope that we continue to do that with the academic part of it, and more so, obviously. But the more that we can, you know, kind of expand our footprint to the size of the schools and not have 3,900 waiting for founders is just too high. I think it's 1,000 or close to 1,000 classical. It's just too high. It's just, we're building big schools. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the properties that we just got to get there. I get the fact that there's just not enough money to do it, but the faster we get there, the better.
I think it goes to show that parents are looking for options, and still children and high school students are looking for options. So glad we're able to do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Dismiss
it.
myself and head back to work.
Okay.
Not that I'm not at work now.
That's it.
Going to- Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mary Ann.
Thank you, sir.
See you later. I'm going to real quickly give you a summary of our financial. I'm sorry, our before we talk about audits and finance, in between, you know, what are we really getting results wise on the academic side? How does our authorizer look at us and our success? So what I'm showing you here, we looked at a previous board meeting, I think it was in June, but this is final data now from the state, and this is for one of our charters in Texas. This is Texas College Prep. So these are all the schools other than Premier and Virtual that's on the Premier side, and I have data to hand you in a second on that. We're excited and encouraged that we have moved from 68% of our schools being an A or a B to 72%, so we're moving the number up. You can see here, kind of in the middle, it says overall at the top, and then it shows in green it's got A's, and then blue it's got B's, and then C, D, and then you can see there's no IRs, improvement required, or this year, which is the first year for campuses to be rated, it would be an F. So we have no F campuses. A district, a charter district our size, that is commendable, that especially as diverse and spread out as we are, that we don't have a few schools that are in school improvement. So great job by our staff, doing a phenomenal work overall. You can see in the other parts, the other domains and accountability, and we've had training on this before, and we'll have another training in the next 6 months. Keep going back over this because there are always little tweaks to it from the state, but you can see other areas where there's things to work on with, like in Garland, you can see an F in academic growth. You can see an F in shirts for relative performance. Now, it doesn't roll up into your accountability. And again, I don't want to go back through all that today, but it's really, they look at that student achievement column or academic growth or the relative performance, and whichever is the best, that's what they use, okay? But they just still rank it and they still put a letter grade. So this is helpful, very helpful, this A through F model that your campus directors, your superintendents, your academic support, they can look at what they need to focus on. So let me let you look at that for a minute and see if you have any questions, anything that jumps out at you. Again, we'll get more in depth on it in the spring talking about it. We actually present this as a part of a taper report, but I wanted you to see this since it was finalized in August. You will notice on the far right column, it's called school improvement. You'll see target support, additional target support, and this is related to what's in the Dropbox for the plans that go with schools that end up in that category under a consent item for those items related to governance. It's campus targeted improvement plans for Texas College Prep and Premier. So that's what it's connected to. What does it mean? I do not want to downplay it, although I'm going to sound like I am. Especially with Premier. So let me show you the Premier. Premier is a dropout recovery model. And you will notice an encouraging thing is look at all the A's for the Premiers. And this is a different accountability system called Alternative Education Accountability, AEA for short. You can see 90% of our schools are A's or B's in this system. But you still see over in the far right, you see the targeted support, you see the comprehensive re-identified, the comprehensive progress, you see the additional targeted support. Most of this is because they do not have a different system for domain 3, which is this, the column to the left of the support label is closing the gaps. They do not have a different system for AEA. So they use the same thing regardless because it's tied to the federal government, what the feds want to see in an accountability system. So to simplify it all, it boils down to this. In the state accountability system, they do not hold a dropout recovery school accountable for dropout rates. They do not expect it to be 90% or 75%. They do not expect that because these kids come to you, they've already dropped out, they're coming back to you, but they can still calculate when in the cohort and they can say, well, it's a dropout of that cohort within the 4-year window and ding you. So typical Premier would have a graduation rate under that normal standard system of 50% or less. That's just normal. That has nothing to do with us serving the kids. When the kid comes to us, the student comes to us literally for one day. When we count them for attendance, they are now our student and we're responsible for them if they don't ever go somewhere else. So if you come to us for a day, you leave the second day, you're now our dropout or you're not our graduate. So it's that silly, that ludicrous. And they know this is a problem, and I've talked to them. We've testified legislatively about it. Over 10 to 12 years ago, we used to have what was called an 85-day window, where they had to be with you at least 85 days before you held that school accountable. It needs to go back to that. Okay, this is not a big problem with 5 million kids all over the state. It's a small little subset, so that's why it's not really a big deal to anybody. But that's how you end up with a label. And what does that mean to us? If you were to have glanced through these targeted improvement plans, they're talking to us about our academic performance and what are we going to do to get our 90% in Algebra 1 higher. We're doing a great job, but they're doing it just because we're in this system because of our dropout rate or our graduation rate. It has nothing to do with academics, but you got to do work. You end up doing paperwork because not only do they put you there, they're giving you $100,000 per campus now to do this work. So yes, I've just now downplayed it. Okay, I get that. But it really is something, if you were in the weeds of it, you would understand on the Premier side. And I've told this directly to people at TEA in positions that they can help us do something about it. They still got other work, other lifting they got to do. They agree. They got to agree we got to fix it. We've talked to the feds, U.S. Department of Ed. They say Texas could fix it, but they haven't, because they have a way all across the country to look at AEA, alternative ed, separate from standard. So we're working on that. Where does it really matter, where I would not downplay it, would be on the TCPA side, where you're looking at, as I mentioned, there's some of these categories where you see, in that closing the gaps, you see those Ds. Those schools have work to do as it relates to sub-pops, and we know that. And we're working diligently daily in the classrooms to focus on those students that are represented by that label, that sub-pop. And that is very needed. And overall, the program is good. The school improvement, it's needed. There's some funds to go with it. But as you look through that drop box and you see all those names, especially on the Premier side, I just wanted to give you some context. Going back to the positive of it all, you look at the data, you'll see 72% are A's and B's, those top categories for TCPA. And then on the Premier side, you see A's and B's at the 90% level. So we've had a great year. Amazing work by our campus leaders, as well as our academic team here at the home office. We're going to show you now, do you have any questions on the academics? We're going to show you, I think, one video, or is it two? It's one, right? We're going to show you one video. It's 3 minutes, but I think you'll enjoy it. And then we'll move on with the board meeting.
My name is Daniel Serna. I was born in Mexico, Nuevo León, and I go to Premier High School of Pandit. I came to this country, to this school, because I wanted to do something more with my life. I didn't want it to be just a normal person. Education was the main reason I came here, because the education system over there is kind of, they don't want you to really learn things. It's not that much about knowledge, about how much you learn. It's about how much you do. I did felt like I wasn't learning anything, and I wanted to do more in life than just be a someone. I wanted to excel.
My name is Mel Bagasa, and I am the ELA teacher, the English Language Arts teacher here at Premier High School. Well, I met Daniel 2 years ago, and Daniel was very shy. You know, he was insecure, he was unsure, but I saw Daniel blossom in ways that he's just amazing. I want to say the most touching thing to me that he said one day was, you know, Ms. Gaza, all this time I've been wondering what I'm going to do with my life. You know, do I want to be an architect? Do I want to be an engineer? I want to be a teacher.
Whatever I do in life, I want to help people improve and become better, just like they do with me. This place has changed me for the better, and it was what I wanted. It gave me the opportunity I needed, because I don't think I was going to make it anymore, because I don't think that school was for me.
And this is what it's about. Being here completes him, you know, and seeing that completes me.
Just barely. Thank you.
That's what we do. That's what it's about. So appreciate you guys. Thank you for volunteering, donating your time to be a part of this. And again, I know we spent a lot of time just looking at numbers, finance, and facilities. And it's critical. It's needed because of kids like Daniel, being able to give them that opportunity. So,
Yeah, and
thank
I
you.
think to what was also previously said, and the reason I kind of emphasized it at the end is I think that that's so important that we still have to be able to build the schools to have the kids be in, draw teachers to them, and not give them bad facilities and do all that stuff. So I understand we want to hear more of these types of stories, but at the same time, I also know that if we're going to deliver the right product to get kids in seats, we have that other part's very important.
Amen. All right, that is it for executive report. You want me to jump into consent items? We have consent items, and as I mentioned 2 meetings ago, we're breaking them out into major areas, categories: finance, facilities, TEA, governance, and other. So we have 14 items, and we're asking, we hope you've reviewed these, we're asking that you approve them. And as always, if you want to pull any of them and discuss them, feel free. But we're asking you to approve consent item 1 through 14.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Right. I will make a motion to approve consent items under E of the agenda, 1 through 14. I'll make that motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Thank you. Does anybody oppose? Consent items under E. Consent items 1 through 14 under E of the agenda passes unanimously and are approved. So we're going to go to separate items.
Separate item, we're going to start with the annual financial and compliance report. We are grabbing Kirk, our auditor. He will be right in to talk about
Get started on the
18-19 annual financial and compliance report, the audit. Kirk, we got a seat there for you between Robert and Marvin. Joe, did you meet Kirk last time?
Yeah, I think we met last time.
I think everybody's met.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, Corey, you going to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
And Ben said go ahead. He'll be right back.
Okay. First of all, Kirk, thank you for being here. I like Kirk here, so that if y'all ask questions too hard for me, I just look at Kirk, and then he can answer them. Thank you for being here, Kirk. As you know, every year we go through our fiscal year used to end August 31st. Now it's June the 30th. And as such, our AFR report, on the financial report, is due to the state 150 days after the end of your year, which is, I think, November the 27th. So that's why we do this at the November board meeting, and make sure that we can have that submitted to the state on time. I don't know how much of this you've been able to look through. I have a few highlights I would like to go over first, if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Just a couple highlights from our year financially speaking. Our total revenues were just south of $171 million. We're at 170, 883, 170. Total expenses were just a little over 152 million. So our net surplus for the year was 18,510,000, basically. And that is a 10.8% margin. I have those margins broken out just for informational purposes by our 3 entities. TCPA's margin was 8.1%. PHS's margin was 16.5%. And the 501c3 margin is 2.5%. Just a little background to that consolidated total. Also, wanted to talk a little bit about our cash position. Last year, our cash was just under $58 million. This year, we're at just under $66 million. So that is an increase of about $9 million over the previous year. And days of cash on hand, we like to hear, right? Last year, we were at 136. This year, we're at 158. So we are 158 days of cash on hand. And our daily expense rate based on last year's expenses were about 417,000. So that's where I get that calculation.
And I just, I'm sure Joe understands that sometimes I'm not 100% clear on the difference between your cash balance, your cash on hand. Some of that's restricted, right?
Well, what I was doing here, days of cash on hand, that's just how many days we can
Oh,
operate.
days, not.
You know, our current cash balance, how many days can we operate?
So
And it's 158 days.
158 days. And what's the requirement?
I don't know if there's actually a requirement, but it's, I think,
You'll
100
end
days.
up on your charter first.
Yes.
Typically PEA wants about, they
90 or
want
120?
about
90.
25% is what they want, so that would,
That's 90.
That's
90 days.
A quarter.
Right.
So we're almost at just 5 or a little over 5 months.
Yep, 150, yeah.
And then James, what is S&P?
Oh, I was just gonna say S&P,
What are they like? Other than 300?
if we get down around under 140, they start getting nervous, just because for our rating,
At our triple B flat.
rating. So we are well within what they've been looking for.
So those are just some highlights I wanted to go over. Any other things you saw in there you want to discuss or ask about, feel free to do that at this time. I'm open for any questions y'all might have.
Are you and for Kurt going to go to the back with the financial?
I am, yeah, I've
You're
got that,
doing
yes, sir. Yep. I just want to make sure anybody's questions they wanted answered.
Or those initial financial.
So if not, page 51, there are a few things I want to go over, just let everybody know about. Number one, thing I wanted to make sure everybody understood was the audit reports are considered unmodified, which is a good thing. We want them to be unmodified. Also, that there were no material weaknesses identified in our financial statements. There were no significant deficiencies identified, as well as there were no non-compliance issues material to the financial statements. So those are the things you want to see. Also, I wanted to make note that our auditor considers us to be a low-risk auditee. So as an organization, we are considered low risk. So those are all positive things that I'll make sure everybody knows about.
How do you determine low risk?
Well, it's low risk as it relates to the federal program.
Yes.
Okay, if you're receiving federal money, that's what that refers to. That's only assigned to that category of funds. And so when you're low risk, it means that you're in compliance. There are no findings as it relates to your processes or internal controls as it relates to the federal programs, okay? And that you've done everything you're supposed to do. Your report's filed on time with the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And so what that in turn means that I don't have to audit as much on the federal side. If we found a finding and we have to report a finding in your federal programs, then automatically you become high risk for 2 years. And then that requires that I have to audit about twice as much in your federal programs the subsequent 2 years to then become back in compliance and come back to low risk.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kurt makes a good point. There are actually two sections. There's the financial statement section and there's the federal award section. Yes, and low risk has to be part of the federal award section. Thank you, Kurt. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody have any comments?
Just a couple things. We're gonna we did not get into details of some of the changes that were made. You notice that our surplus was higher this year than prior year. Some of that has to do with some expenses that occurred this last year, as well as the fact, and that's one significant aspect of that. Also, we look forward, as the board has indicated previously, which is if we do have excess, we should be pouring back into our teacher to make a significant point. We discussed it before, how we can modify the salaries to build that back into our teacher. So I just want to mention that as part of this, because as we went through these numbers, you hear them and they are higher than typically we have.
Yeah. Also, I passed this out. It should be a supplemental handout inside. your package, probably the back. It's kind of the 5-year roll forward that kind of speaks to what James just said. You can see our net assets through the year need to go up based on our net surplus. And also what James said, when we talk about the budget amendments here in a minute, we'll discuss a little bit more about, how we, doing well financially, how we're turning that around to, as James will put it, pour back into our campuses. We'll be discussing that.
So any questions?
In terms of, you mentioned teachers, do we have, I assume we have data in terms of compensation relative to peer districts? We have.
We do.
And yes, we do.
At a high level, what's the?
We actually distributed, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Or Chris.
No, I was going to Chris talk to compensation. I kind of look at the industry wide, just, how do we compare financially overall? Make sure everything's apples to apples. So I don't have the data in front of me for compensation purposes, but I have access to that because they all have audited financials that they have to put out there. So I can look at that as a line item as well. Take that. Just don't have it with me.
No problem.
So we're nervous to throw out these numbers that Corey put together, but I'm going to let him rattle them off because the normal thing you could do is you could go one of two directions. You could look at it and say, wow, great, we're doing an amazing job financially, kudos. Or you could look at it and say, we're cheap, we're not paying enough, let's give everybody big raises. So give those.
Well, I didn't print them out.
Read the percentage. You know what it is.
So
this is in comparison to
this is
our
very
peers.
high level. I went across some of our peers in this industry in the state of Texas.
This is off their audit?
On their most recent audits that they have filed. I compared us to IDEA, International Leadership, Harmony, and of course, KIP. KIP's individual, well, at least they have been as individual. I compared them to the DFW area. Just they consolidate. They consolidate this year, but have those? I don't know if those have been out there.
That audit's out there yet.
No. Yeah, it's still the
They're audited
DFW,
at the-
Houston. They still
at
have
the Austin
clusters.
level now.
Yeah.
That's where they're.
So going forward, we'll kind of look at this. Probably get some historical data, 3 to 5 year trend, because 1 year snapshot may be some anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said. I found it out, but that we didn't quote. You want me to mention about that? So one of the things that did make our surplus a little higher than normal, probably somewhere between $500 and $1 million, about $500,000 somewhere there is, and talking to our auditors, now that our fiscal year ends June the 30th, it's a lot harder for us to identify and reasonably calculate what our incentives we're going to pay, December timeframe, because it's about 6 months out. So, in talking with our auditors and internally, we decided we're not really going to accrue those anymore, just because that reason it's hard to reasonably estimate what that's going to be. So, we're going to start incurring those as they actually hit in the year that they hit. With that being said, we did not accrue for the incentive that we paid out from this December. We did not accrue that into the previous year. So that did help our bottom line a little bit.
And that was straight to our bottom line.
Yeah, straight to your bottom line. Going forward,
That's about potentially $1 million.
Yeah. Going forward, we pay it out. The year we pay it out, so the year will hit the financials.
I just want to mention that because that's significant. I mean, not a major part, but it is. We're looking at some surplus. That literally very bad surplus.
And what are the percentages of our peers?
So on our peers, as I mentioned, we were at 10.8%. IDEA was at 7.15. KIP is just under 7 at 6.95. Harmony's at 3, and IDEA Leadership was at 3.7. So, but that's just their most recent audits, that snapshot. I want to do a little bit more historical trend to see where they are, but that kind of
What's the percentage of?
it's basically their surplus, net surplus, bottom line net income
no.
as a percentage of their total revenues.
Okay, Chris, would you answer Joe's question? What were we doing last year, which shows up on this audit, and then how have we changed it?
Yeah, last year, our teachers, we're talking about teachers right now, it was 90% of a first-year teacher with the opportunity to earn 12% incentive over the course of the year. we drastically changed that. What we have now in place is we look at what the ISDs are paying. We give them credited years of service. So in essence, the teacher is getting paid 90% of what they would get as the base salary at the local ISD or ISD cluster. When I say an ISD cluster, unlike, an ISD has a particular geographic boundary, we have schools all around here that cross many boundaries. So we'll have North Texas cluster to get an average. So we'll do that in addition. So that resulted in a significant raise for most of our teachers. And then we, on top of that, have kept in place 12%. So our revenue stream right now, speaking very with a broad brush stroke across both charters, we're getting about 85% of the revenue stream that typical ISD would get. Even so, we have our staff having the opportunity to get up to 102% of what they would get as a base pay in the local ISD. This last year, we had HB3 come out where there's an influx of cash. Sometime along the way, we had Lieutenant Governor say, we're going to give each teacher $5,000 raise. Well, that never happened. Never was in any kind of legislation, never. But that's what the teachers grabbed onto. They had this viewpoint that if I went to the ISD, I'd get a $5,000 raise. Well, what we have done is we ran the numbers for the ISTs, the clusters that we're comparing ourselves to, as well as what we actually did on our actuals. The average raise for the ISDs was $3,100 per teacher. The average raise that we had from 1890 to 1920 was $41. So we're close, even though the gap is widened as far as revenue between us and the government public schools, we have continued to close the gap on teacher pay. And we're always balancing in this, so we're doing much better on that. The recent influx of cash is right around, not counting the incentives, was just for base pay alone was about $4 million. So we're continuing to make improvements there, which is great. We're having a good time doing it, trying to reinvest that money. So that just came out. So we'll probably send you guys some information on the charts the teachers have seen, but just put out that phase 2 as a part of this week.
And here in a moment, when we talk about the budget amendments, I have some highlights that will speak to that a little bit on the budget amendments.
Yeah, and it is difficult when we're doing this because we're balancing the traditional school system where they expect the teacher expects a certain amount of years. I get a certain step pay regardless of performance. So we're balancing that, which is a reality. We're competing with that. So that's there, but then we also, on the flip side, we want to make sure that we are retaining and rewarding people who are performing well and serving our students. So what we have is a hybrid. What we have is a base pay that is based on steps, but then we have the incentive program that's also based on personal and campus performance. So we're trying to strike a balance there so that we end up getting quality teachers who are serving the students and being competitive on. So that's the order.
Any other questions?
Thank you for that.
You said, were you comparing incentivized pay here to base pay of ISD schools?
Actually, we do both. So one of our major goals was to, first and foremost, be totally transparent with our staff so they know what they're getting paid compared to the local ISD. Sure. And then the second one is like 1A and 1B. 1B is let's be competitive in that pay. So the chart that we give them, we show them what the base pay is at the ISD. So they can see years 0 to 20, what they would have at the local ISD. It also shows what the base pay is that they would receive with ResponsiveEd. Then they see a separate line item. Here's the potential that you could receive on incentive if you check all the boxes on personal performance and the campus performance. And then what the resulting pay could be for them. So the person who's trying to see what the worst case scenario would be, they look at that chart and they look at base pay ResponsiveEd, base pay at the local ISD. The one who's like an optimist and they're saying, hey, I really want to knock this out of the park, they'd be drawn toward what the potential incentive I would get. And so what you'll see is, in general, comparing base pay to base pay, we're at the 90% mark. But then incentive that they have the potential to make and the pay at the ISDs, we're higher. But yeah, it's once again, it's trying to give them a realistic picture. Here's where we're at. We give you all the information so you can see what ISDs we're comparing to, what goes into determining what years of service are. So completely transparent. We can fit it, the program on a 8.5 by 11 for them to review, and they can match it with their salary. So we're trying to give them just a realistic view of what it is we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so I come from a long line of educators, but I'm not up to speed, unlike public school pay. So are there even incentives in public school ISD that they can,
It's
or
not,
does it just stay at the base?
It's not, yeah,
there's no incentive in the district.
there's not an incentive. What they end up doing is this. They'll have a base pay, and then they'll say, if you have a degree, you get X amount of dollars added to your base.
Not performance, though.
Not performance.
If
There's no
you have a
incentive.
master's, you get a
Yeah,
thousand.
no performance. So here there's performance.
Exactly. We have substituted that. So we don't give an increase to base simply because you have a certification, right, or because you have a degree.
Sure.
But we bake it into the performance incentive program. So that the theory being, if you had a degree, you had certification, you hopefully you're more effective at your job,
So-
and you have the opportunity to make more money.
So what complicates it is not only was it at 85% across the state, now with HB3, that gap's grown.
Right.
I don't have the data yet to know how much, but it's now a greater gap. The other thing is we are not required to hire certified teachers. They must be degree, but not certified. So, and our founders, which is where you see a lot of this growth and demand, they hire a lot of teachers who are not certified. They're subject matter experts. They come in with a Latin degree. They may have a doctorate, right? They come in, but they're not certified teachers. They teach at a college, and then they teach at the high school. So that's different because they would not even be able to get a job at the district. And then you don't have this incentive piece. And there was one other thing. What's the other thing we talked about that's a distinction? Just the class size. That's the last thing. The class size is going to be different at a charter school. So you might have 30 kids in a high school at a traditional school down the street. And then because it's a smaller high school, you may end up with 15 or 20. So it's a different experience for the staff member. But at the end of the day, there's a group of people that are just thinking, right? And it's all off across the board, right? Some people are, I want to be here because of the culture, right? But as we open new schools in new areas, we may not have that established. They're looking at, well, what do you pay? Generally, I don't think we're fighting over people trying to decide, do I want to leave the school district to go over there on pay? Yeah. Because they're thinking about experience. And then when they get there, we want to make sure they know we value them, especially when we get a little bit of bump from the government, from the state. We want to know bulk of that money is going into teacher pay. And then with the inner city Title I schools, be Title I or inner city or both, we're trying to get to a place where we can pay the 100%. And then there's an incentive on top of that because it's tougher work. It's harder.
And it's important that we continuously look at how we're comparing against whether it be ISDs or other charter schools, and we just make sure that we have the best talent. However, we get there for that. We can't have a disparity where we bring people in paying them way more, and then everybody finds out for how much we're paying. So just make sure that we do that consistent, have good hiring practices as you go about that. But certainly that's more for me. But stay focused on it.
But just a little plug here, with Chuck's emphasis on this, the reinvestment of teachers. People have been working on this new compensation strategy for months. We are just, we're giddy, and we're making right progress. We're going down the right road. There's all kinds of things that we identify that we want to improve, that we want to continue to improve. But I think we all believe right now that we're on the right road, being the right direction. So it's been progress that we've been making the last 9 months. It's been exciting, and to get the comments back from the school leaders as we're rolling this stuff out has been encouraging. So, end of my plug.
No, it's a good plug, and I think it's important. And it's been I don't want to call it a pain point. It's been close to a pain point for a long time for a lot of people. The more transparency you put around it, it's going to be great. The thing that I just make sure you focus on as well is the back end of this, how we document performance and how well people are doing, just to be able to evidence why, and defend why, people are where they are.
Point well taken, and they have been going in.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Are we done here with this? Okay. So we're going to do a little bit of a time check here. Lunch is here. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to go into.
We do approve it. Yeah, we need to approve it.
Oh, we got to approve this. Oh, I am sorry. Hey, we can't just have lunch first because I want to think about it. All right. I will make a motion to approve the 2018-2019 annual financial and compliance report or reports that were just presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Marvin. Does anybody oppose? All right. The motion is approved unanimously that we approve the 2018-2019 annual financial and compliance reports. Okay, so we're going to temporarily adjourn or pause the meeting. We're not going into closed session, we're just pausing.
Kirk, we have extra food if you'd like to eat with us. Appreciate all your.
Okay, we're continuing the charters, Texas Charters board meeting. One board member has had to leave the building, but we still have a quorum present, and we are going to continue the meeting with separate item number 2, consider approving the budget amendments for 2019 and 2020, or through 2020. Who's up?
I just want to mention real fast that I have put a supplemental schedule in there for you to look at, just a little bit of the impact of these.
Yep.
We want to go over them, but just for reference purposes, because of the HB3 impact and the teacher raises are on there. But that's just kind of a.
Which we talked about,
We talked about
just
teacher
prior to the
raises.
to the meeting, going into or adjourning first minute.
Just reference for you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any questions. Do you want to just go right to a motion for that? All right. Do you want
Motion to approve the 2019-2020 budget amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you. Does anybody oppose? Okay. Separate item number 2, and we is approved unanimously by the board, and we approve the 2019-2020 budget amendments as presented in the Dropbox, and other materials that have been presented today. Next item up is number 3, consider approving the purchase and finance of property located in Arlington, Texas.
All right, so Arlington, we have a career high school building that we are proposing to purchase. Very quick, I'll just cover that. Let me jump to Tyler real quick. Let me go down to the next slide. Tyler Classical, I just wanted to mention Tyler Classical High School building, which is on the left. You know, we built the elementary school there 2 years ago. We moved into elementary. We just now finished the high school. So just go down so where they can see. So you just need to see a couple of pictures. It's now done. So we're reporting back, you know, as you're approving them, just letting you know when they get done. Just show you some pictures of them when they get done as well. So I just wanted to show you that there. But let's move on to Arlington. Arlington is a premier high school that we've been in for 3 years. We've leased a facility there the last 3 years. You can see Texas Stadium right down here on the right, just below the 157. That's Texas Stadium, AT&T Stadium, where the premier high school is, right there on Interstate 30. We've been in that building for 3 years. We've been leasing at $41,650 a month. When the lease comes due, we always do try to go to the landlord to see if they're interested in selling the building, so that we can usually save money by purchasing the building. So we went to the landlord. We negotiated with them a price of $4.75 million on the purchase of it. So the current rent at $41,000 will be reduced to somewhere in the neighborhood of about $21,000 a month on the mortgage, which will save us about $240 some odd dollars a year in rent. It helps us to build equity that we can later. This used to be like an ITT technical center. It's in very good shape. When ITT was in there, they spent quite a bit of money on the building itself.
And that pointing to the bottom left was the numbers you were giving, I think.
Yeah, so yeah, right there, close to the $21,000 a month. So you can see what the savings are. We're requesting board approval up to $5 million. The agreed upon price is $4,750. That gives us $250,000 for a couple of things we need to do to the building. I think a couple of air conditioners to be replaced and things like that. A couple of modifications. We also have, in addition to the Premier High School, we use a portion of this building for the iSchool Success Center. That's on one end of the building and the Premier is on the other. So we're making a recommendation today to purchase the building.
But we're approving the additional for the renovations. So $5 million is the total.
Yes.
Say $40,000.
It's definitely, yeah.
Wow.
And the location,
having
go back to
assets,
that
too.
location, go back to that.
It's a very nice building.
The location where it's at is, even if we need to sell it later for some reason, it's in a great location, right? Just right there off of the interstate. That's, Arlington, that whole area of town's growing. Stadium's right there.
That's Six Flags, that's
You can actually park in
360.
our parking lot and get to the stadium. So that's fine.
Well, I'm hoping I get a permanent parking pass for this.
So,
Yeah. So, and I just, from my perspective, is I like having the asset. The other side of that is it requires debt.
Right.
But I think that we're still in very good financial, and the rates are improving as we continue to go. In the market, they're not as improving as quickly as the Fed lowered the rates with it. But I think it's still a very good interest rate environment for us to be doing this.
you know how much we expended of the line of credit?
At 20,
Of 80.
25 of the 80. So I'm doing my best to spend.
I'll keep encouraging you to do that.
Yeah. So we're going to be coming back with a bond probably in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, and timing won't be bad. At least it shouldn't be. I don't know that the guidance that I thought I heard the Fed say was that they were going to pause. But, you never know what's going to happen with the unemployment rate, other things. And because inflation, what inflation? They keep dropping stuff off the calculation. They'll never have inflation. Sorry. I keep forgetting we're being recorded. But I'll make a motion to approve. Makes sense to me.
Second.
Okay, the next.
Hold please. Does anybody oppose? No. All right. The motion to approve the purchase and finance the property of up to $5 million is approved unanimously.
Right. So this next project we're proposing for approval board, we currently lease a couple of buildings from ResponsiveEd Church in Austin. This particular facility, as you can see, we wanted to point out where the Texas State Capitol is. In its proximity to the downtown, it's in a great location. This area is called, Chuck, remind me what that area is. Mueller part of town. They're adding, where you can see they're adding a lot of homes. There's new buildings. There's just a lot of stuff going on in that part of town. Other charters have looked at this part of town as well, so we don't want to lose the market share in this part of town. So we go to the next slide. I just wanted to first show you where the proximity of it is to the state capitol. There are actually two buildings that we would be purchasing. One is a daycare that they currently lease out. It's the back of the property right now. We would purchase that building along with, I believe it's 2.8 acres. And then there's a second building that's a metal building that has a gym and some classrooms in it. So we're recommending the purchase of these two buildings in the 2.8 acres, which includes some parking already. And we also need approval for, we're actually asking for 13.5 in total. We are going to go into this metal building and do some renovations in order to be able to house about 550 kids here in the 2 buildings, and then also be able to house a few other kids inside still some of the church property. You want to address any of it about what the pastor's doing as far as the new pastors taking over and they're remodeling the church? And
Phillips, Craig, and Dean, the praise and worship group, you're on the radio a lot. Phillips, the son, who's still probably late 60s, his dad, who's in his 90s, his dad started this church 50 years ago. His dad has stepped down the last couple of years, and then Phillips, his church, which is another part of Austin, has 5 other locations, and they've added this one. So they had 4 locations they've added. So they're going to put a lot of money into renovations, making it look like the area. There's a Dell Children's Hospital across the street. The whole area is being revitalized. It used to be the airport before they built south of town in the last 20 years. A lot of land. What will wrap around it is your traditional urban area where you would have more Title I students, which is currently the population of the school. It's a Title I school. And so you have the KIPS, you have the Ideas, you have other schools that are Title I schools. We do well, and we want to serve that population, that community. But as well, I don't know if we actually have a picture that would kind of show the area other than that, Robert. Is there something that shows across the street? I don't think so, right?
it's not.
So you might have 1,000 square foot houses behind it there. These are older houses, but across the street, you're getting these $1 million garden type homes being built. And so it's a very young professional families that work in downtown. What we want to do is actually create a school like Leander, which is north of Austin. We want to create a kind of a suburban type of classical school in this facility, because that's what the church is doing. They're renovating it. They're trying to attract those young professionals. There's other churches, other schools that serve the other populations around. But this gives us an opportunity to do something a little unique in that it's in Austin proper, but it's going to have more of a suburban feel to it. And in addition to that, we want to create a model. Talk to TE about this. We got to figure out a way to do it. But when legislators come to town every other year, so they're in town 4 to 6 out of 24 months. We want to create some space where they can bring their kids, and they can actually put their kids in this school during that time, spring of every other year. Talked to a state rep the other day. He was very excited about it. So a unique model, but it'll be built around the founder's concept. So it's different than anything we've done. It's small. In some ways it's similar to Carrollton, buying that building. Carrollton has such a larger footprint. The limitations, but as you look at this picture, the limitations we'd have saying less than 3 acres is solved by the issue of we're sharing this parking space, we're sharing this auditorium area when we have Christmas programs and graduations and things like that, and they're able to use some of our space. So it gives you a lot bigger footprint because of the partnership with the church.
In this remodel that talked about the townhome, this area right here next to the church has been sold off. So there'll be new townhomes being built here. But there will be a new driveway that's going to come in that we'll have permanent access to, that will come in here for townhomes and for church and school.
You drive across that, and Brother Reynolds, sorry that you don't necessarily know this area like these two guys. You drive across that road there where they're going to put that new drive, it's like being at Lakeside, Flower Mound. And then there's the Children's Hospital. Very nice area.
Well, they have that big tacky light sign that says
Probably.
Lakeside on the front of it. Well,
You call it Bricktown, that area of downtown? Kind of like that. Kind of got that feel to it. A lot of restaurants, a lot of movie theaters.
you should go visit.
Yep.
So the 13.5 includes the additional renovation cost on the front building, which is the metal building. We would add the additional classroom.
So they listed it at 10 million. We've negotiated down to 7.8. We have an audit that is for 7 point,
Appraisal is
Appraisal.
7.2.
7.2. Why the other extra 600,000? It's because we're saving 24 months of lease payments. This is a very high lease for a church. We're not paying by ADA like we do a lot of places. We're paying a flat monthly amount. So you factor that in, and then you factor into something that is definitely not a part of the appraisal, which is access to all this parking and having a use agreement with them as we buy it.
You have a bank issue with the appraisal being 600 grand lower than the purchase price?
We should not,
a house.
because we're ended up using the bond, rolling it all in.
Okay.
Instead of a traditional bank finance.
The line of credit that.
And to be honest with you, what we did was
Should
something
always
we've
be
not
honest
done in a
with us.
while. Is we had, we've had these appraisals, and we've talked about the frustration with them because it seems like whatever we're offering is what it's appraised for.
Yeah.
So we did not tell them, kind of see where it was at, right? It's kind of a test. So if we were to go back
Fail or
and
pass.
like that,
Yeah. All right, sorry.
so we're asking for approval for $13.5 million.
So this gonna be a founders, so it's gonna look like the one we have here in Louisville or the one in Flower Mound. Gonna be beautiful.
A lot of buzz in the Austin area about the Leander School, where they have about 800 on a waiting list. It's about 40 minutes from downtown to the north. A lot of requests to build something south of town, Bee Cave area, and there's just no land. Now, this church, the kind of the mothership of this church is out in that west Austin area. So we've been talking to them about using some of their space to put it's not big enough to put anything more than something like a special needs school or an autism school, something like that. We have, like what we have in San Antonio. So it's not that we're going to go to that area and build a building and serve 1,000 kids, but there will be people that work downtown that live in Bee Cave that may come to this location to drop the kids.
Okay, just remind me, can I just ask a question? You mentioned San Antonio Autism School. Is any of the charter school organizations that we, what I'd say compete with, have they created an autism school? Or is we still, and do we still just have the one? Didn't we recently talk about?
We have the one, and we've asked for approval to open one up in this area.
Okay.
And we have federal money, the federal grant to open that in 2020, 2021.
Okay. I think that's great.
In North Austin, Round Rock, we did, I believe the board's already approved us to into Round Rock to purchase land and to build a founders class for academy of 1,000. So that will be roughly, I think it's about 10 miles to the north of this, up on the north side of Austin. So as we continue to plan out, that'll be opening in 21. Round Rock, Conroe, and we have an additional one in Prosper that we're working on right now. We'll open in 21. We're also continuing to look for land in the southern, like that Bee Cave area of Austin, Keller, Denton. We've got a piece of land identified, working on that for 22, 23.
Do you have another slide?
I think that's
Where slide that shows what the current lease is or anything?
I think that's the last one. I think
Okay.
that's all it is.
Any other questions on
The daycare in the back, that
Austin?
daycare building's about 8 years old. I believe it's 8 years old. So not very old. That building's a little bit older. We'll have to do quite a bit of renovation. That's what the additional.
Any questions?
What's it like on the inside of the metal building?
Right now, a gym, and there are 2 stories on one end that has some classrooms. So the gym has quite a bit of space around the outside of the gym area. Architect says we can take that long ways, which will give us additional space to go up the classroom.
So we have kids on the second floor of the portion of the gym, the portion of that metal building. They're already have a middle school in.
Oh,
And it'll be something other than a metal building.
The city will
do
require a
something-
facade
We'll
on it.
do something on the outside. We haven't got quite that far.
Maybe it was like a premier.
Right.
School. Right. Founders.
Premier Founders. Okay, we're asking approval for purchasing, financing.
13, how much for that?
13.5 for
13.5.
Austin, Texas.
That's consent item, I'm sorry, separate item number 4. I'll make a motion to approve the 13.5 for the property finance, purchase finance, and hiring of an architect and civil engineer for property located in Austin, Texas. We just discussed. By your second.
Second.
Second by Joe. Thank you very much. Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion to approve the property in Austin passes unanimously.
The last thing is consider approval of purchase of approval of construction costs for Granbury.
So at the June board meeting, you guys approved $934,000 to purchase land, architect and civil in Granbury. Just to go back to that conversation, we were leasing from a church in Granbury that's continuing to grow. We've been there for about, I believe it's almost 10 years. The church needs their space back, so they asked us to see about finding a location. So we tried to see if we could find a location in Granbury to move to. We're unsuccessful in doing that. So Chuck and I talked about building the first premier high school model. There are other places around the state that we'd like to maybe be able to replicate this premier high school model. So this will be the first one that we will build from the ground up. The church has agreed for us to extend our lease for 6 months so that we can get the construction completed. But we're asking the board, this is the construction cost. We actually have the bids. If you'd like to see those, it's 3.8 for the construction. So that's what we're asking for the board's approval today. It is about a 13,000 square foot building, 4 pretty good sized large classrooms. There's some special population classrooms, half court gym. Estimated enrollment would be about 150. So we're actually at the design development validation stage right now. You wanted to take a quick look. We actually now have, just take a quick look at that. We now have 3 architects that we're using as opposed to at one in the past. We have so many more projects that are going on now. So this is what we're requiring the architects to submit to us, is a document like this that we have to sign off on as we get into these phases of construction. So we have 2 architects now in the Texas area, and we have an additional architect in Arkansas. So we're kind of spreading the work out instead of having it in one place. So that kind of helps us get some different designs. So this particular project will be handled by Heidel, which is they're up here in the Briscoe area, I believe is what their office is. So that's what they've given us on the numbers are about 3.6. You can see in there if you see the numbers. We're actually asking for a couple $100,000 more just to cover change orders and like that to make the process. So 3.8 is what we're asking for board approval today to build the first high school in Granbury.
This is the sample of what we would see.
This is a rough rendering. This is not exactly because the city's still working through. It's probably going to have to be all brick as opposed to this is kind of half brick, half metal. But it will look similar to this, very close. This end cap on the building, that's the 2-story end cap, we'll have a gymnasium in here. We're building this to where this end cap can be flexible so that if we wanted to build a premier where the end cap could be a CTE center as opposed to a gym and a cafeteria, that we could actually do that as well. So the end cap on it could be modified. The regular part of the school would be built out the same, but the end cap could potentially be modified if we could do something slightly different. Depending on what kind of construction.
So this is the actual building, right?
This is just a rendering. That's a rendering. That's just a rendering we developed about a year ago. We're working off of this model.
Saw those cars out.
They look real.
It does look real.
It's just a
It looks real.
Especially with the cars,
People?
plants and.
No.
Oh, and there are people shadowy. Great.
Any questions?
So that way it would be a design we can use other.
Yes, we would replicate, this would be the first time, Bill, that
Our premiers do not have a gym, so it'll be nice to have a gymnasium. So there's a little exercise, half gym. It's a neat model.
All right. I will make a motion to approve unless there's any questions for further discussion. I'll make a motion to approve just make sure I get the construction costs. So we're not buying anything, so just construction costs
this is
and
already
possibly
approved the
financing.
land.
You approve the land of the architect, right?
Yeah, that's already been approved. This is just the construction.
Construction, but we don't put financing, but in every other one we talk about financing. So I'm just going to add that word to the motion.
Probably should.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So to approve the construction cost financing as it relates to the building construction of the Premier High School in Granbury, Texas. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Is anybody opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously to build a school and to construct and finance a school in Granbury. So, thank you.
And this last item, we're going to take off the agenda.
Right.
For this.
Item number 6 is going to be, we'll address at the next meeting.
And we have no other discussion item.
No discussion items. Any other questions or concerns that the board would like to bring up or the management? Okay, we're adjourned. The Texas Charter Schools meeting is adjourned. Thank you.